good people? Izzy Max here, back again for some pregame action. This is Season 4, Week 3, and I am joined, as always, with Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to going over the pregame.
Yep, last week was interesting, to say the least, so hoping we have the same here. But first, we are going to go over some transactions. Starting from the top, of course, Tay was able to pick first, but we'll start with the top teams. And Dina dropping Kingler G-Max for Tauros. This is just kind of a whatever kind of trade, I feel like. I mean, it is your tier 4. They're not doing really important things on your draft, but they can come for like tech options. Tauros does give some Intimidate support, and also I think she now has a way to proc the Anger Point. But it's just kind of a whatever trade in my eyes. I don't think Kingler was really coming to anything. And seeing the way her comp is composed, I don't see Tauros really coming to much either. But what do you think about this one?
I mean, I think it's a okay trade. Tauros has some unique tools that can threaten some Anger Point shenanigans. It has a very high attack stat, and I just think it's better generally than Kingler. But like you said, I don't see either of them coming super frequently. This is maybe like a tiny upgrade, but not enough to move the needle on her team overall, I don't think.
Yep. All right, why don't you get the next one, which I think is actually kind of big.
Yeah, I really like Hector's trade, Regirock for Hydreigon. So Hector's team fits a very specific niche. He's got 2 of the best redirectors in the format that are both also great attackers. He had 1 setup sweeper, and now he has a special setup sweeper as well as something that can just max and deal damage right off the jump without having to set up. So he's understanding what his team does and really leaning into it and leaning away from sort of this secondary mode that wasn't working as well for his team. So I really like this trade for him. I think the Hydreigon just adds some more depth to his primary mode instead of building a much weaker secondary mode. But what do you think about the trade?
I really like it. The only thing I don't like is Comfey is kind of feeling less and less important. Because if you look at his squad, Comfey actually procced the Regirock decently nice. You're not proccing Hydreigon with Comfey. Oh my god, please don't.
Do it.
But, I mean, other than that, Hydreigon, I honestly feel like is a pure upgrade. You're not leaning heavy into, like, you have to 2-turn set up Regirock with Trick Room and then the Giga Drain. But with Hydreigon, you don't have to set Trick Room. You're not proccing it with the Comfey. If you are, you're a freaking madman. But I like Hydreigon more than Regirock, so I think this is just an awesome trade. Moving on, we're not going to talk about this one. Charles just re-picks up Audino and re-drops Togepi.
You should do it again next week.
Yeah, flex. Do it again next week. That'd be funny. I am just going to jump down.
Just keep changing your mind.
I am going to jump down to the burst one, though. And we're dropping Snorlax for Ferrothorn. So this one is really interesting to me. And I get it on one hand, and then I don't on another. So Snorlax was your Trick Room setup sweeper, but also was physical and shared a speed tier with Glastrier. Ferrothorn, however, you're going to kind of struggle sometimes to do damage with it, but it is slower than Glastrier. So this one is on the back of my radar for potentially awesome or just like, who really cares because you have Glastrier. I don't really know how else to word this one because you can set up Ferrothorn, but it's not really going to be insightful. So I don't know about this one yet. I'm hopeful, but skeptical at the same time. What do you think?
I actually kind of like it because Snorlax was basically just a setup Trick Room sweeper, and now it's the worst one on his team. Like, Glastrier just does it better consistently into every matchup. So Ferrothorn isn't necessarily a sweeper under Trick Room, but it is a late game win con if you can eliminate fire type moves on your opponent's side. Then you can just set Leech Seed, Protect, and just grind out a late game like that. So I think that he adds something that was doing, he takes away something that was doing functionally nothing on his team at this point, which is Snorlax, and adds something that at least forces you to build a certain way so you don't just get super tilted and lose to a late game Ferrothorn in a 1v2 or a 1v3.
Right. Well, hang on. My main problem with this, they're both weak to fighting and they're both weak to fire.
Yeah, you mean Glastrier and Ferrothorn?
Yeah, like you're going to be teching the same thing.
I don't think they come in the same game though. Yes, they get teched. You tech the same thing for both of them, but I think they allow you to play two very different style of games. And while you can bring the same techs to attack both of them, I just don't think Snorlax was doing anything. Is there something better he could have gotten in that slot?
I wish it would have been a special sweeper.
Yes, that would have been nice. But for what it is, knowing how Burst plays, I think he's going to win at least one game. Just Leech Seed, protect Ferrothorn.
Like I said, I'm skeptical but optimistic at the same time for this one.
Yeah. And then this next one for Jess, I think you should take it since I play her this week.
This was no surprise to anybody. She was setting this one up, first of all, 2 weeks ago, a week ago? Before the season started, and she forgot that the freaking stick bug dragon poison thing, Dragalge, was still on the board. So it's no surprise that she picked this up. Like I said, it surprised literally no one. If you thought she was actually serious, you're an idiot. It just makes sense with what she's got, to be honest with you. There's not much to say about it. Urshifu's good. Garchomp has his shortcomings. And I think Urshifu just fits her general team build a lot better. That's really all I got for this one.
Yeah, it doesn't just die to Kyurem, so that's a big plus for her matchup this week, but we'll get into that later. But Gumi's trade, the Zero Aura for the Rillaboom, is one that I'm actually a big fan of. Like, Gumi and I ran Zero Aura and Volcanion before in the MVCE. So we know that works really well, but while I was theory crafting for potential draft cores given my slot, Rillaboom and Volcanion was something that I really liked. It's just the best Fire, Water, Grass core in the league now. And I think they support each other really well. You've got physical, you've got special, you've got an average offensive stat of 127.5 between the two of them. You've got priority. You've got super solid defense on both of them. They're both a little specially weak, which is one potential downside. But I think it just complements what he has better than the Zero Aura did without giving out that fake out pressure.
Yeah,
what do you think of this one?
The Rillaboom just makes sense. His team was incredibly ground weak to start. And this also does help the Naganadel, which I do think can be a little bit weird. I just think this is an overall upgrade. When I seen his team fully fleshed out, the first thing I thought was, man, you really need grassy terrain or just something to help with this ground weakness. Because Mons 1, 2, and 3 were all weak to ground. Because it was Zero Aura. No, Volcanion's tier 2, Naganadel's tier 2. So, your main...
Grimstar,
yeah, your main source of offense is weak to ground. So you got to be kind of careful with that. But I do think the Rillaboom is going to help a lot. And you're trading a physical attacker for a physical attacker. So let's be honest, you're not really losing too much. You might need that electric coverage later, but you do have the Vikavolt. So I just think this was overall just the correct play. Moving on to Toxic, this is what I originally thought the Sharpedo should have been. Same with Ryan. I know Ryan talked to me about this one as well. Sharpedo just should have been Crawdaunt, period. But physical Water Dark, trading for a physical Water Dark, I don't think there's much to talk about this one. So shed some light. What am I missing?
It's just pretty cleanly an upgrade. You lose out on potential random Sharpedo-specific shenanigans, mostly revolving around speed boost, but Crawdaunt just hits harder, has priority, has knockoff. It's just better on his team. So pretty strict upgrade. Not, again, huge for his team, but obvious improvement.
Next up, we got Ryan. So go ahead and get this one, because I got some thoughts.
Yeah, Mr. Mom G for Fletchender. So he's trading sort of a utility pivot that doesn't have a lot of offensive pressure into just a priority tailwind setter that doesn't have a lot of offensive pressure. I think on his team, I'm very split on this one. I understand why he did it, where his team theoretically struggles with faster modes and how the Fletchender helps with it. But the Mr. Mime just also provided so much potential utility for his team that there's a world where this is incorrect, but I'm leaning on the side of I like this currently, but why don't you share your thoughts on this one a bit?
Okay, so I was talking to him. I was like, hey, man, you're using your Latios like I use my Latios. Let's just trade. Just joking, because, Latios doesn't get calcs that I need, and he's using his Latios more as support. And the Fletchender is actually going to help with that, because his main source of a Tailwind was coming off of that Latios. And now you have the priority Tailwind in the Fletchender. You can kind of be more free to run offensive Lottie on his squad. So I do really like this. It does unlock a little bit more of his team. He's not forced to run that Lottie supportively. And that's kind of my thought. I know that's where his head was at as well. So we'll have to see on this one. Again, Mr. Mime does apply some sort of utility outside of just Tailwind and Feint. So we'll have to see on that one. But next is another big one, Duraludon for Rhyperior. So the league's KD ratio champion is back in the league, and I think it's going to work really well on Johnny's squad. Duraludon for me on his squad was kind of just awkward, it felt like, because of the way he was wanting to run it, and it wasn't really getting the specific calcs that he needed. Especially when you look at the game against him and Gumi, it just wasn't doing what Johnny wanted it to do. And I think the Rhyperior is going to be able to do that. You're just going to have to be careful with it, with all of those weaknesses and the 2-4 times weaknesses. It's going to be kind of an issue, but I do think Johnny and his mad brain is going to be able to make Rhyperior work with what he's got.
Yeah. I mean, Rhyperior is obviously super solid. Solid as a rock, some might say. But man, I just funneled my inner Johnny for that one, and I would like to apologize to everyone who listened. But I think it's going to be pretty good on his team. He's going to miss the ability to ignore redirection against certain matchups that he has coming up. But otherwise, I think Rhyperior just lets him have a more functional Trick Room mode and answer to opposing Trick Room modes without necessarily needing to go into it for himself. So overall, I like this trade, but there will be 1 or 2 matchups where this is a detriment for him.
For sure. And why don't you take us out with the last one?
Yeah, Blissey for Hawlucha. I'm going to be honest, this makes sense to me. The Blissey was very confusing on Tay's team. I wasn't exactly sure what it was doing, and the Hawlucha, has a bunch of different ways it can function. So I think I like this one. It's one of those where it's, again, I don't see the Hawlucha coming a lot, but I never see the Blissey coming on his team. So this is going to be a great, I believe. And correct me if I'm wrong, but with transfer move, Hawlucha does get Tailwind as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where I was gonna get you, where you say it might not come a lot. I think it comes all the fucking time.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't you tell me a bit about why you think it'll come very frequently?
So if you look at his speed stats, they're very middling to middle high. I think like 105 is the fastest he's got off that Zoroark. So Tailwind is actually going to be super important for him. And Hawlucha base 118, you can potentially just set Tailwind without having to be in the misty terrain. So I think it actually provides a lot of utility and just another offensive option, because currently his offensive options are, base 100 in the Jirachi. And I know Hawlucha's base attack isn't very high. I think it's like 91. But with access to like Swords Dance, it also gets things like Taunt, of course Tailwind, and just some general pretty good utility options. I do think it is going to be super key for Tay moving forward. And now we actually get moving into our games, and I'll go ahead and let you take this first one. This is going to be Anthony and Tay.
Yeah, so Anthony and Tay is a very interesting matchup, because if you look 1-to-1 across the board at their teams, going down the line, they just favor Anthony like one across from the other. Like Dragapult you think is going to be favored over Jirachi, Venusaur over Tapu Fini, Barraskewda over Volcarona, Colossal over Dragonite, Ninetales probably over Cresselia, and then we get into the support options, so it's less obvious there. But in those top picks, just 1-to-1, Anthony seems to have the matchup. But I think Tay actually has the potential to give him some trouble in this matchup, strictly because of the Tapu Fini, which is why it's my pick this week. Because although it doesn't have a great matchup into Venusaur, and I'd say that very advisedly, Venusaur also only has a good matchup into Tapu Fini. It's not good at all into Jirachi. Tapu Fini prevents it from going to sleep. The Volcarona hits it hard. Dragonite hits it hard. Even Cresselia hits it hard, and New Hawlucha will hit it hard. So Venusaur doesn't look like it's great, but it is the only thing on his team that answers the Tapu Fini at all efficiently. Everything else on his team just really doesn't like dealing with Tapu Fini, except for maybe Scizor. So I think he has to bring the Venusaur, and that's why I made it his most important thing this week. It's not so much that it's going to do the most damage, but he has to play it in such a way that he's able to mitigate this Tapu Fini, which I think just looks like a monster this week. But what do you think about the matchup?
Yeah, so I picked probably the counterpart that's going to be right next to the Fini in the new Hawlucha. It actually hits everything that Anthony has with tech moves pretty hard, and can also set that tailwind to where Venusaur in Sun is still not outspeeding a lot of what Tay has, like the Jirachi, Volcarona, and the Dragonite. So I do think Hawlucha is actually going to be super key. It can get a couple of really good one-hit KOs outside of weakness berries. But on Anthony's side, I actually picked the Riolu, not so much for coaching stuff, which I think is going to be important if you're facing down this Hawlucha, but more so the follow me focus sash. We haven't really seen that come out of this Riolu yet this season. But if you're trying to fade these super effective hits that Hawlucha can tech for, I do think your follow me option is actually going to be super important, because it does get things like Throat Chop, Brave Bird, Thunder Punch, Close Combat, Ninetales. It gets Rock Slide. There it is. So if the Hawlucha maxes, you need a way to fade these super effective hits. Granted, Riolu's only going to be able to take one, maybe two, but I do think it's going to be those one or two hits are going to be super important for Anthony to kind of set up what he wants to do. So this is going to be an interesting game. Tay is looking to really start coming back, and as he's still knocking that dust off, I think this might be a good opportunity for him to kind of get one here. So moving on to our next one is going to be Ryan and Charles. So this one's actually super interesting. We have two incredibly good steel types. One in the Celesteela is more bulky than the Genesect, but Genesect has, I believe, it's going to do a little bit more offensively. You're going to have to set Steela up a little bit to kind of output as much damage as this Genesect's going to have. But my main picks for this are going to be the two main follow me options on both sides, in the Blastoise and the Raichu. Raichu going to be able to kind of not let Genesect use things like Thunderbolt. Also just regular follow me is going to be great. And then just on the other side, you're taking away the Terrakion setup, and just other, I think that might be the only proc that we potentially see here. And then for Charles, the Blastoise, again, you're not letting the Celesteela really just run from turn one. You're also not allowing any beat up strategies from the Arcanine, which actually looks decent into what you have. And just some random things like that. I do think the support options are really the key to this game, because you do just have so much offense on both sides from your other mons like the Genesect, Celesteela, and things like that. But why don't you go ahead and talk about the Nidoking and, of course, Genesect?
Yeah, well, I'll cover the easy one first. Speaking of offense, Ryan, if you're watching this, both of these Pokemon are purple. Just throwing that out there ahead of time. But this Genesect, you'll see that it has the yellow drive in it right now. I almost put in the image with the red drive because I think Max Flare Genesect just looks awesome. But I could have also put in the image with the blue drive because Max Geyser looks pretty good as well into this team. But I just think this Genesect's offensive output just looks amazing into so much of what Ryan wants to do. It can cover basically anything he wants it to cover. And I think Ryan is really going to struggle with the offensive output of this Genesect. Like, I think Ryan has a really, really good team, but I think Genesect is like a unique Pokemon that matches up really well into almost all of it. But on Ryan's side, I picked the Nidoking because of the offensive output and pressure that it has as well without having any max pressure. It threatens the Genesect because you can put Flamethrower on it. It threatens the Tapu Lele. It can threaten the Blastoise. It can threaten the Terrakion. It can hit basically everything on Charles' team that it needs to with very, very decent offensive output for the pivoting that you're going to need for it. So that's why I picked the two of these, but man, this looks like a really good matchup for Genesect, and I think Nidoking paired with that Raichu is going to be one way to potentially neuter it.
Yeah, I agree. Moving on, this is all you. Here you go.
Yeah, so we've got Dark versus Maxwell here. So looking at this matchup, I think this Urshifu has a really good matchup into a lot of what you do. Because if we're just looking at the stabs, it hits Melmetal, Latias, Dusclops, Mamoswine. Salazzle's not taking anything from it. So it just hits a lot of your best Pokemon with its stabs. So I think it's obviously very good. But looking into Dark's team, outside of the Urshifu, he's got to bring other Pokemon. And Armaldo looks really good into a lot of them. Because you can get the speed advantage with the Armaldo, threaten to one-shot that Victini, you're going to chunk the Melodic, you're going to chunk the Gudra, you're going to chunk the Fungus. Like, Armaldo offensively looks like it does very well into this team without just getting absolutely wasted by the Urshifu. So this is one of the rare times I'm going to pick a tier 4 that I don't know if it's coming or not, but I do think if you bring it, it's going to be the secret MVP this match because of just how much offensive pressure it's going to have into his team. But yeah, other than that, it seems like a pretty straightforward matchup where he's going to try to maximize this Urshifu damage output, and you're going to try to get in something that doesn't just die to Urshifu to kill it back. You have any thoughts on your matchup without spoiling too much tech?
Oh, I'll spoil it. This will go out way after I play the game.
Oh, great.
Fast Melmetal, let's go. After a Tailwind, I outspeed freaking everything.
Excellent.
Yeah, next. Watch the game. We got Noah and Johnny. I'm not really going to run over the teams here because everything that Noah has outside of the Alcremie is weak to Marshadow.
Yeah,
so that's why I have those two picked.
Yeah, I almost put Shiny Marshadow as my pick.
Oh my god, there's no difference. But yeah, I mean, I hate to like, Noah's been playing phenomenal. I mean, let's be honest. I know your game was a little bit hacksy, but he played really good against me.
He did play well my game too, even with the hacks.
Oh, for sure. But man, looking at this, if you can just support your Marshadow, John, yikes. It's going to be kind of tight for Noah. But I mean, he beat a Melmetal Pangoro Trick Room team, or he played very well against it, and he beat the Zamazenta team. So don't ever count him out, but this might be a little rough. But yeah, that's why I picked Alcremie. It's been low-key as MVP, so yeah. What do you got?
So you picked Marshadow already, and Shiny Marshadow looks just like it, so I couldn't really put that there. But Hitmontop is also a fighting type that has Intimidate, and that looks really good into his team. Like, Noah still has this pretty glaring fighting type weakness, and you pick the Alchemy, which is his best counter to opposing fighting types, but his next best counter to opposing fighting types is this Gyarados. I know he's run Moxie sets before, but an Intimidate set here doesn't really look bad into what John has. It also threatens the Rhyperior. It can get some coverage for the Thundurus if it needs it, and then with Max Airstream, it can start boosting itself, and then let the Marshadow steal its boost if it doesn't one-shot it, but, you know, you just kill the Marshadow. It's that simple. But I do think this Gyarados and the Alchemy teaming up is going to be his best shot into these two fighting types that John has that just look so good into his team.
You ready? His best fighting type answer is the Alolan Marowak. Not this week.
Nope, not this week.
Next up, why don't you take this one? This is Toxic and Burst. Very interesting.
Okay, so I picked Kingdra and Liepard. Liepard because priority charm into Burst team just looks really good, and Kingdra because it doesn't get hit by charm, because it can be a special attacker. That's functionally it. Like, Kingdra will do decent damage into Toxic's team. It might still miss some important KOs on like the Necrozma or the Indeedee, especially if he's running Psychic Seed on one of them. And then this Lipard can Thunder Wave it. So I think this looks like a rough matchup for Burst. I'm not gonna lie. Like, Lipard just leverages so much against his team. Like, it seems like a unique bad Pokemon for him to try to deal with just like Thunder Wave, Charm. Maybe he's putting Fake Tears on it. Like, it just seems really, really good into his team. And then Kingdra seems like the best option that is only hit by like one or two of Lipard's moves instead of all three being good options into it. So that's why I picked the Kingdra as well. But he needs to get that thing off the field as soon as possible. But why don't you tell me about the horse and the horse killer?
Yeah, so we usually give ourselves, maybe a minute to look at the matchup and add a Pokemon on. That's kind of been what we've been doing, just so we don't really dive deep into like tech options or stuff like that. This is the first one where I actually had to sit down and be like, okay, what the hell do I pick for Burst? Because I didn't want to just put Horse, because I actually think Horse doesn't have the greatest matchup in the world here. But I think it's honestly the best offensive option you got, and you kind of just have to pray that it works. So I did pick the Escavalier. If you look at Burst team, Magmar hits it, but if you're not follow-meing, why? Just why? Capraja has Heat Crash, I guess, and then Manectric has Flamethrower. Outside of those three mons, which are all low tier and super situational, you have zero answers for a late game Escav. Not to mention, you do have Heat Waves and other options to just kind of neuter the Glastrier. Also, Ferrothorn, you just picked it up. That doesn't really look like the best option either, since it is still weak to fighting and these fire techs. This is just a weird one that, I don't think Horse is the best option, but it might be your best option. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. This one might be a good game. Just fully on that one.
Lipard just looks so good.
It does. It really does. Next is mine. So I have to be careful with this one, because I do know Jessica's team. So
spoil all of it.
Yeah.
This might come out. This will probably come out after the match, so it won't matter.
When you guys play Wednesday?
No, this will be out before the match.
Yeah, it will.
I'm just saying, but we don't have to publish it till after the match, and then I'm the only one who knows, and it doesn't matter.
I mean, yeah, but you do have some good offensive options with the Zamazenta and the Curum. And with those three stabs, only one of them actually hits the Togetic, and Togetic is bulky as hell and can probably live one of them. So that's why I did end up picking the Togetic. It is going to allow Jessica to either set up or just start wailing on Mons with some of her decently good offensive options. And then for you, I did pick the Sableye. This gives you Fake Out, Quash, and Will-O-Wisp actually looks decently good into at least her physical answers. But I'm trying not to say too much. These Mons might be important. I don't know. If she doesn't bring Togetic, it's a weird world. So, I don't know, man. Tell me what you think. You could probably say a little bit more. You haven't prepped yet.
Yeah, she definitely brings Togetic. I mean, not definitely, but like 80% brings Togetic to this matchup. A couple things look decent into my team. She needs to make sure to leverage the Mew to kill the Zamazenta, probably. I mean, Moltres can also do it decently well, but she doesn't want to let her team get into the range where it's just things that are soft to Zamazenta if I bring it as a cleanup again, but I don't know exactly what I'm running with it. Sableye might be in the doghouse for a little bit because, Wide Lens Will-O-Wisp missed for me last week, so it's probably smart to bring it again, but I'm very sad about it. But this would be a fun matchup. Jess and I always have good matchups. I think the last two sets we've played, I've had a Pokemon live on 1 HP without being Focus Sash at least one point during the set. And Every set we played it just ends up being a great 3-game set, except for the first one we played where she gemmed a Pokemon incorrectly.
Oh, so, yeah, the Cinderace with 2 moves.
Yeah, the Cinderace with 2 moves. I mean, she wasn't winning that set because no one prepped for physical Coco at that point, but every other set has just been down to the wire and a great set, and I don't really expect this one to be any different.
Nope, I don't either. Next, here you go. Gumi and Hector.
Gumi and Hector, I think, is an interesting matchup. So we were talking about Hector having like the one mode, which is something with it's a lot of modes, but it's one general style, which is something follow me, something set up, something go burr. And I think the Rillaboom is actually going to be a good disruptive tool with that because of the fake out pressure that it provides for his team, while also having some priority pressure in case he does get something fast going. So I think Rillaboom's going to allow him to potentially pivot into something that matches up effectively against whatever Hector's going with his offensive mode. But on Hector's side, I'm actually picking the Comfey, which I know we said looks like it's losing some of its purpose without the Regirock, but because it'll be in grassy terrain, if this Comfey gets out and Gumi does in fact set grassy terrain for it, Hector's going to be healing 2/3 instead of half every turn with +3 priority, which is just going to be a lot. So I think this Comfey could out-heal a lot of the damage Gumi does if Hector gets one set up off, and it'll be enough to keep his Pokemon alive long enough to go through and get the KOs that he needs to get. So I think those are pretty obvious picks, the Rillaboom at least, and then the Comfey I think is a bit of a dark horse pick because I don't know which of his Mons is going to follow me and which one's going to set up, but I do have a feeling Comfey's going to come in and heal something.
Yeah, so I picked the Darmanitan, which I know didn't come this previous week, but if you look down the list, it has an answer for actually everything, which is incredibly good. You know, Darmanitan does have good coverage, and with the 2 premier, follow me users in the Blastoise and the Togekiss, set up, kill the Blastoise, whatever, and then you're still sitting there with maybe like a Togekiss follow meing while you're just obliterating whatever you have. On Gumi's side, though, I did end up picking the Tornadus. After I played him and seeing how he actually ran the Tornadus and seeing that it actually gets access to Heat Wave, I think this might be a good answer to that setup option. Either you Tailwind to outspeed your following turn, or you just Heat Wave and maybe chunk the Darmanitan lower than what it could use for Belly Drum. So I do think the utility and offensive pressure that the Tornadus actually gives in this matchup might actually be enough. So this is my match to watch this week, for sure. Next, we got Raz and Dina. This one's interesting. So if you look at the squads, and Dan will talk about why he put Thievul down there, Dina really doesn't have a way to hit Metagross outside of some random techs like Physical Coco. So it's gonna be interesting to see how Dina can kind of handle this Metagross, because Raz does have a really good team around it to support it with things like the Electabuzz, the Grimmsnarl, and of course the Tornadus. For Dina, I actually picked the Butterfree, as weird as that sounds. Once you get rid of the Electabuzz, just put the Metagross to sleep. They can't do anything. Also, I do think Rage Powder, alongside that Raichu, could give you some really good options. Because, you have both redirection options. And if you see both, you got to kind of guess which one's going to be doing the heavy lifting. And Raichu, honestly, has a decent, offensive matchup. So I do think Butterfree potentially could be pretty key here. But you got to find a way around the Metagross. Talk about your baby. Let's go. Come on.
All right. So Thievul is the top Metagross counter NA. It is the best at this job because foul play. It is just a fast foul play, faster than anything that's on Raz's team. And if he triggers a weakness policy on this Metagross, this Thievul can one-shot it. And that's really all you need to know, is that Thievul can one-shot Metagross if it triggers weakness policy or if it doesn't max. So there's just so much offensive pressure on it that I think he's actually got to pivot to something like the Keldeo, or in this case, the Marowak. Because foul play into Marowak is interesting because it doesn't take the Thick Club bonus into effect. So it's hitting off of Marowak's low base attack, not the high base attack. Which means Marowak is actually pretty good into Thievul, and Dina's team does just have the Butterfree as things that don't get hit by Max Quake. So I do think the Marowak mode is actually looking like it lines up better than the Metagross mode this week. But Thievul is going to be a player this week, and this is just a flashback to my first ever MDL match where Matt didn't prep for Thievul as the Metagross player, and everyone learned what Thievul did that week. So Thievul is going to have a field day potentially this week unless Raz is careful. So I'm looking forward to this match. It might actually be my match of the week because of it.
Hell yeah. And that's actually going to do it for us. So you got this one. I got the Goomy Hector. So we got one blue, one red.
Yeah, I kind of also want to say me and Jess just because of history, but we have one win between us. So maybe not the best.
Dan bad? No, I'm joking.
Yeah, Dan bad this season.
But anyway, that's going to do it for us. Any last words, Dan?
No, I'm looking forward to another exciting week, and I'm glad not to be stuck in Jackson, Mississippi in the middle of a blizzard anymore. It's a good time.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. All right, well, we will see you all in the next one. So, peace.